My name is Michael Pelletier. I am the Executive Director of the Institute for Global Engagement here at the University of Houston, for those of you who haven't met me. I started at the University of Houston 3 years ago. I was the U.S. Ambassador to Madagascar and Comoros and retired from the Foreign Service and came here to Houston to continue to do global engagement, but from a university and higher ed aspect rather than from a U.S. diplomacy aspect. And as soon as I got to the University of Houston, I looked around, I met so many wonderful colleagues and students and faculty and staff, and I went and I met with the provost and the president, and I said, you've hired me to do the easiest job in the world, because if my job is to make University of Houston globally engaged, you all have already achieved that goal, because the University of Houston is so incredibly globally engaged. And so we thought that it would be kind of hopefully fun and hopefully an interesting way to highlight just how many ways there are to be globally engaged at the University of Houston by organizing this morning's Coogs Without Borders event, where we will have different presentations about some of the different ways to be globally engaged, and where you will see different offices, different partners in global engagement across the university set up around the room, including our amazing colleagues at ISSO, the International Student Service Organization office, but also posters and some installations from some of our learning abroad experiences, and you will hear from faculty, students, and staff about some of the wonderful ways in which they have helped the University of Houston to be globally engaged. My team teases me a little bit, and the provost teases me a lot, because I like to say we have over 47,000 students now at the University of Houston. And so I say that means there are over 47,000 ways to be globally engaged, because each student brings their own perspective, their own reality, their own experience, and their own challenges to being globally engaged. And our office likes to help them and to help all of the different colleges and departments and institutes across the University of Houston to figure out pathways for each of those 47,000 students. I say the provost teases me because she says, you're not going to get a budget for 47,000 individual programs, and I understand that. But we also understand that everybody's reality is different, and what everyone brings to the table is different and is incredibly valuable. And how do we help the university provide the support to all of those students so that they can be globally engaged? And I just want to say a few words about why it is important to be globally engaged. The one more obvious and one perhaps less obvious. The more obvious one is because the world is now global. And every job, every reality, every life you are going to live is going to involve engagement with the rest of the world. COVID taught us many things, positive and negative, but one of the things it taught us was suddenly global supply chains didn't work so well and people were hoarding toilet paper. Global matters. It matters even if you have no intention of ever leaving this wonderful city of Houston, because supply chains are now global. So every job, every life you live is going to have something to do with what's going on in the rest of the world. And we want our students to be prepared for that. We want our students to be prepared to get those amazing globally engaged jobs that are out there, and to be able to brag to employers that when we graduate from the University of Houston, we are ready to work in a global setting, in a cross-cultural, intercultural setting, wherever you need us. The less obvious reason why I think it is important to be global engaged is a little more philosophical. And that is because I have found through my own experience, through my learning abroad, through my work abroad, that the best way to appreciate yourself and to understand yourself and your own culture is to engage with other cultures and other languages, and to realize that there is something that is very true and inner to you, but there is also another way of being. There are other ways of expressing reality. There are other ways, other languages, traditions, and cultures with which to engage the world. And I think that teaches us all both a wonderful humility, but also a wonderful flexibility and a wonderful ability to really engage with the world and solve whatever problems and challenges the world throws at us. And so today, this afternoon, morning, afternoon, we hope to highlight some of the ways in which the University of Houston provides programs and courses and experiences and opportunities for students to be globally engaged, whether that is by traveling around the world on some of the amazing learning abroad programs, whether it's by traveling around the world right in your own classroom through online collaborative international learning, whether it is traveling around the world without ever leaving Houston and going to some of the amazing programs across the city of Houston, never mind the amazing programs right here at the University of Houston, and through working with our amazing faculty who do so much interesting research and partnership with countries and professors and colleagues and businesses all around the world. So there are indeed 47,000 ways, next year I'm gonna have to say 48,000 ways, for a Coug to be globally engaged. And we hope this morning to highlight some of those. What we've done is organized it to be very free flow. So we'll have some opportunities for people to come up and share their experiences with you, and then we'll take a bit of a break between each panel, and you're invited to visit some of the different tables, some of the different poster shows, see what some of the Coogs are doing, and talk to some of our team who are here to help you. We have everybody, I think, from the Institute for Global Engagement staff here, from our Learning Abroad staff, our Global Partnerships staff, our global programming staff, including Stacy Michael, who put together this afternoon's event for us, thank you, as well as Dr. Maggie Mahoney and myself from the leadership of the Institute. So please corner us, ask questions, look around, appreciate what you and your colleagues have done, ask questions of the panelists, eat some food, drink some lemonade so you keep this terrible cold that's going around the city away from you, and think about how you and your friends and your colleagues and your staff and your students can become globally engaged. So with that, thank you again for coming, and let me invite my colleague, Dr. Maggie Mahoney, to come up and get us started with Dr. Melody Lee and Dr. Stella Gregorian, who can talk about some of the internationalization efforts we have right here at home. Thank you.
My name is Maggie Mahoney. I am the Director of Global Engagement here at the university. And I'm so pleased to be joined by two incredible women. I always look up to other women and the ways that they lead. So Dr. Melody Lee is a faculty member in the Modern and Classical Languages Department teaching Chinese Studies. And Dr. Stella Gregorian is in the Department of Sociology. And I don't want to actually speak on your expertise, like what your area.
Right now it's food and culture.
Food, that's right, thank you, food and culture. So today we're going to talk about internationalizing at home. You are also, again, encouraged and allowed to get up and go eat some food and go see some posters and to text your friends and colleagues to also pop in and pop out today. So internationalization at home is what we're gonna kind of touch on, and there are a lot of ways to do that. There's global research that happens right here in the University of Houston. There's our Global Citizens Credential, and taking global courses, taking language courses, maybe participating in a global internship or fellowship. But today we're going to focus on how do we cross borders without leaving our classrooms. Collaborative Online International Learning, COIL is what we call it. COIL is a way for us to take classes with other students, to teach courses with other faculty, all using the internet and using online and technology resources. So I'd love for both of you to introduce your programs a little bit. How are they supported? Where did you get funding from maybe, or do you need it? Can you tell us a little bit about your programs real quick, and then we'll ask about about them.
Okay, I will go ahead and start. So just a little promotion. So the class that I actually taught with COIL grant is like the CHIN WCL 3342 East Asian Cities. It's called Tales of East Asian Cities. This is amazing class. So if you have students in the spring, I'm teaching this again in the spring. I'm very fortunate to get the COIL grant last round, and then we have, because of the grants, that we were able to collaborate with National Taiwan University in Taipei. So we have incorporated a lot of collaborations, like including we have invited guest lecturers to give us like guest lectures online. We also have done a lot of collaborations with the East Asian Studies class, actually in Taipei Normal University. And the professor and I actually co-tour some of the sections. Like he's an expert on Taiwan, so he took over some of the Taiwan sections, whereas I took over some of the Hong Kong, Shanghai sections. One of the highlight of our projects is also that we actually group our students with their students because of the time zone. We can talk about a challenge a little more later, but like we actually have a lot of asynchronous collaboration, including having the students there really giving virtual tour of my students, because a lot of our students were not able to travel abroad to the study abroad program during the COVID, so we were able to really have those students give virtual tours through cameras on their own time. So they got this like real life experience, and they also got to know that their life experience in Taiwan is actually different from what they learned or what they read. So that's very meaningful.
And Melody, did you focus just on Taipei and Taiwan, or was it focused on other countries or cities?
Yeah, so this East Asian Cities class actually mainly covers 6 cities in East Asia, including Beijing, Shanghai, Hong Kong, Taipei, Tokyo, and Seoul. We did add Houston, since we are based in Houston. So we have the students, like one of the highlights of our collaborative projects is actually have the 2 classes grouped together, and eventually all of them were grouped together to these 7 cities, and they built a virtual reality space through spatial. You probably see some of the images from the slideshow. So they did an incredible job to really showcase what we could do through revisualizing this space through what they learned in class and their imagination.
That's incredible. So they got to actually take courses with other students, and we'll get back to the synchronous part of that. That's impressive. So Stella, Dr. Gregorian, can you tell us a little bit about your program as well?
Sure. And since Melody started with a advertising campaign, I too, for the spring, I'll be teaching the sociology of food class. This is the premier class that we connect students with students abroad. But also in the summer, for people who are interested, or you can spread the word, we have Global Houston being offered in sociology, and that's a tour throughout different areas in Houston where we talk about immigration patterns to Houston, and we do it through food. So we go to restaurants, we go to farmers markets, we go to all kinds of places where there's an immigrant international element, and the students have a blast. So make sure, advertise that. But in regards to COIL, which I too was fortunate enough to get a small grant through COIL, to help enhance what I'd already started doing in my classes, in my food classes, and that was connecting my sociology students with sociology students at Yerevan State University in Armenia. And so the sociology program there, my colleague Yuliana Melkomyan was very interested to connect our students together. And so we came up with a plan where we would have something mutual, some reading, some interactive website, and we would then spend a week or 2 on it, and then we would meet online. And the students would discuss the topic based on information that they had. Their class was a sociology of migration class, so there was this wonderful overlap of food and migration, but these are sociology students who were trying to communicate with one another, and last year when we did it, we didn't do it in spring, but we did it in the fall. It was really a success. So as we talk, I can give you more details about that.
So I think the only other question I'd love to share, and then we'll be able to kind of get together and talk about this one-on-one. What were the ways that you had to cross borders and deal with challenges and go across boundaries to be able to make this happen? What was challenging to be able to put this together from your perspective as faculty, but also for from the student perspective?
Yeah, so I can start. So I think one of the biggest challenge to work with like a different time zone of like 13-hour time zone. So it's really difficult to get the synchronous collaboration in that way. We had to move some of the classes like to the evening time. So I deliberately set the class like late afternoon already. So we moved some of the classes late evening, like in early evening time, and then the Taiwan students had to get up really early for that. But the students were really cooperative, like really accommodating, and because of the wonderful experience, they were able to do that. So we did like some of the sections that way to get the synchronous, like online collaboration. But the most important part is we actually had to build in a lot of synchronous collaboration. Like I mentioned, we grouped the students in their own groups so they can meet on their own time to do the virtual live stream. They also work, we have a lot of collaborated tools like Google Forms, Padlet, virtual tools like Spatial, so they can work on their own time and track each other's progress. But still, you can see like what every person does. We make group leaders of each side, like the Taiwan side and the Houston side, so then we can keep track of they can also like be in charge of their own group. So, but it was challenging for the time difference, but we were able to navigate it like through different ways of collaboration.
Wonderful. Thank you, Melody.
Yeah, I agree with Melody. The time issue was hard and quite challenging. One thing I was talking to Melody about, the students in Armenia were a bit more flexible than our students to meet at a later time, either early in the morning or very late at night to accommodate a 11-hour difference. So that help matters because they weren't as rigid and in their time as our students were. Plus, there was a time issue where we organized our courses at a different interval. So it was virtually impossible to do it during a course time because we would have scheduled our courses at a totally different time during the year than they had. But it worked out. But my biggest challenge ended up being language. And we, with my partner, Dr. Melkomian, who is fluent in English, and I'm fluent in Armenian, we came up with a plan where we'd have groups, and she populated her groups with strong English speakers, so she made sure that there were English speakers in each group. And then I did a kind of a spiel with my students, I started off with, we're at an advantage, we're gonna do this in English, they're at a disadvantage, and speak slowly and explain concepts before you move on in the virtual online meetings. But very quickly, our students would start talking, and then they wouldn't stop, or they would say stuff like, we were at a tailgate the other day, and they would just keep going on, and I would say, hey, Armenia, do you know what tailgate is? And they'd go like, no. Or they would say something that they had translated into sort of a different kind of English, and I knew what they were saying because I knew the Armenian word for it, and their instructor would say, hey, US, do you know what they mean by this? Like it was home trade. And my students thought they're like trading homes, literally. And what they had meant was home economics or all the factors that go into having a household. And this kind of derailed the conversation for a while until Dr. Melkomian stepped in. But what happened was that eventually as we would step in, students got used to that. And we would translate because we knew there were problems, but then we would also interject more things, which might not have been what the students were deciding to talk about. So we had to curtail how we were talking. So language was an issue all the time. And the last thing I'm going to say about language, though, something my students learned and I learned. So this is the beauty of this international collaboration. We learned things as well, was that I had started by saying we're at an advantage and the Armenians are at a disadvantage. And then I was reminded that perhaps it's the Americans who are at a disadvantage because literally they only knew English. I had a few students who knew a little bit of Spanish, and that semester there weren't really many who were speaking another language. But the Armenians knew English well enough, maybe not to talk to Houstonians, but well enough. They all know, or most of them knew fluent Russian. They know Arabic, they know Farsi, they know French, so they were like, you sure we're at a disadvantage? Maybe you guys are at a disadvantage that you only speak in one language. And this was a great opportunity for us to talk about international communication when language is a barrier. What do we expect from someone at the table to have a seat at the table? What is the language? And so that was a really good, interesting discussion.
Wonderful. Well, one of the big takeaways of this is internationalization at home or going global right here in Houston is definitely possible. And so from a faculty perspective, putting COIL into your classes, Collaborative Online International Learning, getting grants like they both received from the Texas International Education Consortium, supported by our office, can help create these opportunities for students who get to learn without needing to leave Houston. Maybe that fits with their work schedule, maybe that fits with their finances. There's just so many opportunities for students to be able to go global right here in Houston, and COIL is just one of the great examples of it. So I'm going to thank you both for talking about that with us. And so now, as part of Coogs Without Borders, we hope that you would come and walk around and see posters, meet some of our Institute for Global Engagement team, but also come talk to faculty like Melody and Stella, Dr. Lee and Dr. Gregorian about the opportunities that they've had, how they've done it, or maybe even for students to come talk to them about what their students got from this experience. So again, I invite you to grab some food and have some conversations, and we'll join you back here in about 10 minutes for our next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If I could ask you, we're going to start now on a second short presentation looking at the learning abroad experiences and the student perspectives in particular. And to lead that panel, we have my colleague, our Associate Director for Learning Abroad, Andy Beer.
I am happy to be joined by three fantastic Coogs Abroad alumni who went abroad. Like Michael said, I'm Andy, I'm the Associate Director of Learning Abroad, but I really want to give the students tons of time, so I'm going to start with them introducing themselves and telling us where they went on their study abroad program.
Okay. I'm Elizabeth, and I went to Taiwan in summer 2023 for 1 month. It was to study Mandarin Chinese.
I'm Ashman, and I went to Italy. I also went to the UK, and I also went to South Korea as part of my BBA in management. And that was in 2021 and 22.
I'm Wajahat, and I went to Jordan in 2022 to study Arabic. And in 2023, I was the recipient of the Critical Language Scholarship and I was sent to Nizwa, Oman to also study Arabic.
Fantastic, and I love that y'all all went to such different locations as well. So our big question for y'all on our theme of breaking down borders is, what were the best, hardest, or most border-breaking things you did while you were on your program abroad? And let's start with you, Elizabeth.
So the first thing I had to deal with was that I've never been out of the country before. So I've been on a plane, but only to go to like North Carolina or something. So it was a very new experience. And in Taiwan, a lot of things are in English, but it's mostly they're speaking Mandarin Chinese. And so I had to get used to. I'm a Chinese studies student, but I don't really use it much in the U.S. because I feel awkward. I feel like I should fall back on English because I don't want to miscommunicate with people. But in Taiwan, that wasn't really an option when I was out on the street and just trying to communicate with any random person because they don't know English. And so I was really awkward at first, and I would very awkwardly buy things at the night market, trying to remember what the food was called, and had a strange back and forth. But I slowly got more comfortable with speaking Chinese because I was in a very speech-based class. And so I was able to get comfortable speaking with other students and people who also don't really know Chinese, and then also having simple conversations with native speakers. And near the end of the program, one of the things I did that was a big jump from how I'd always fallen back on English before was that I had a problem with one of the prompts we were going to do and with my teacher. And my teacher can speak English, obviously, but I typed out a whole paragraph about what my issue was in Chinese and sent it to him through our texting program. And that wasn't necessary at all, but I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh, I need to explain my issue. And I just did it in Chinese. And it was just like, it just felt normal to do. It wasn't like strange anymore. So I kind of overcame that issue while I was in Taiwan.
That's great. And just out of curiosity, what was the hardest part about learning Chinese?
For me, it was definitely speaking because of like the mental barrier to it and also tones. So I could say the right syllable, but it's in the wrong tone, and so I'm just saying a completely different word. So I would say that's the hardest thing.
So not only were you breaking down borders physically, but you were breaking down borders in your own mind as far as language goes. So that's fantastic. All right, Ashman, same question.
So mine's a bit of a more specific story of something fun I did. My sister and I went to a small village 2 hours away from Seoul in Korea, where we went paragliding, but the company didn't really speak English, nor did they give us any instructions on what to do. They just told us to trust them, so they took us on a 30-minute car ride up the mountain with the driver and 3 other college students who didn't speak any English. Then we get to the top, and we latch on to the pilot, you could say, and all he asked me was, which one of you can speak the most Korean? And it was me, but it was only basic Korean, so the most English-speaking pilot was given to my sister, while my pilot barely spoke any English at all. And my Korean is not that great either, so he latched on, and I told him, so what am I supposed to do? Where are the instructions in this? And he said, oh, don't worry, just trust me. I do the landing, you do nothing. And then he said, okay, on 3 you jump. And then I said, well, what else? Is there something I'm supposed to do? Any kind of video I'm supposed to watch? Any instructions? And he's like, nah, just trust me and jump. And most of our conversation was in Korean too, which means there wasn't any conversation happening. And then we jumped, and I had to trust him when he said, just keep your feet up and don't do anything. We landed, and then they gave us watermelon. We sat out watching the other flyers come down, and it was really nice. Without really speaking to each other, we just ate watermelon in silence and watched the other flyers.
What would you say is the biggest thing you learned from that experience?
Definitely human connection that you can't make within your own country, because we were all sitting together laughing and talking without verbally conversing with each other.
That's a super beautiful story. All right, do you want me to repeat the question for you one more
got
time,
it.
or do you got it?
I have it.
All right.
But before we start, I just wanted to quickly, briefly speak about the Critical Language Scholarship Program. I'm also an ambassador for the Critical Language Scholarship Program for 2024. And applications are open right now, so I highly encourage all students here to apply. And if any professor that want me to come to their classrooms and speak, I'd be more than happy to. I'm going to stay till the end of the presentation so we can link up. Likewise, any student, if they want to ask me any questions about critical language scholarship or study abroad, more than welcome to connect with me. So answering the question, Jordan for me was a bit unique in the sense that I had been to Arab countries before, but I had never been outside the Gulf Arab countries, like Saudi Arabia, the UAE. So Jordan, as soon as I landed in the airport, I could see the difference in between Jordan versus those other countries. So it just it was a little bit of a culture shock to me. It's okay, this is not like the Gulf. But overall, for me, the best part of my experience was interactions with the locals. And then in Oman, as part of the critical language scholarship, you have assigned language partners. But for me, I'm still in contact with my language partner and a few of his friends as well that we met. I would definitely say interactions with the locals was my best part of my experience. And the hardest part was, as I said, in Jordan, just like Elizabeth described, people would not know English. So I actually personally preferred people not knowing English. That way, it forces me to use my Arabic, or in anybody else's case, it's like whatever language you have, it'll force you to use that language to communicate and rely like more on like memory and language retention and practice. And besides, like most people overseas, they know that like they'll realize that you're learning their language, so they'll really respect you for that, and they'll applaud your efforts.
That's great. And I'm going to ask each of y'all this question if we still have a little bit more time. And that question is, you're talking to a lot of faculty, staff, students, all out in this audience. What would you say is the most valuable part of breaking down borders, and why is it valuable for them to continue to participate and push themselves to break down borders?
So I know it's been mentioned like quite a few times now that the world is global now. So we, as U.S. citizens, as faculty members, students that are in such a global and diverse institution like the University of Houston, we also have to make an effort to learn more about what goes on in the world, given that the world already knows a lot about us. So it's time for us as well to get some of that knowledge, get some cultural exchange and dialogue going on. And who knows, we could probably take steps towards making the world a better place once we have better understanding.
Beautifully said. Ashman?
For me, it would be opening up your mind, because living in one small town and the rest of your life, you don't understand how many different kinds of cultures there are, different kinds of people there are. When you go abroad, you learn that everyone is so different than you, with different customs and different languages, but at a very innate level, we're also exactly the same. And you understand that when you go abroad.
Thank you so much for saying that. And Elizabeth, what would you say?
I also had a pretty similar thought to Ashman. It's just like that you kind of expand your perspective, and it becomes maybe not easier. You're better able to understand other people and where they might be coming from, because you've just had more experiences that are different from your own. You haven't just, you're not in the little bubble you might have lived in if you don't experience other cultures. And especially when you learn another language, like a whole new world opens up of communication with other people and understanding.
So I hope y'all all took away that if you haven't gone abroad before, you must go. And if you are a faculty or a staff member, the more that you can open up your classrooms and build out faculty-led study abroad programs and encourage students to go abroad, they're going to turn out to be amazing, eloquently speaking students who are going to promote your programs and just global connection around the world. So thank y'all so much. If y'all give them a round of applause, please, because it can be hard getting up here in front of so many wonderful people and talking.
So to talk about university partnerships are really a great way for the institution to show its support for all of these different types of international engagement that we've been talking about, whether it's COIL or whether it's learning abroad or other types of engagement as well. There are so many different ways for universities to partner together. And I have two colleagues from UH here with me to talk about some of those partnerships that we have. Immediately to my right is Dr. Karen Jones from the UH Law Center, who's done some really innovative and really interesting differing types of partnerships with partner law programs and partner universities all over the world, and is kind of one of my heroes, because one of the dangers of university partnerships is you can sign a piece of paper and put it in a filing cabinet and you brag to everybody that you have a partnership, but you never really do anything. And Karen has been very careful to not let that be the case. And so she follows up regularly with her partners, she stays in touch, and she really, I think, embodies what excuse me, what a partnership is supposed to be about, which is about working together, wherever that may lead you. We also have my colleague, Dr. Luis Alcocer, who is our Assistant Director for University Partnerships in the Institute for Global Engagement. And we'll hear first from Karen a little bit about how the Law Center is breaking through borders and setting up partnerships around the globe in many different ways. And then we'll hear from Dr. Alcocer about the many different ways in which we can support partnerships for the university through the Institute for Global Engagement, from the most traditional partnerships to some really innovative and new things that we're trying to support. So, Karen, let me turn it over to you to talk a little bit about UHLC's partnership program.
Yes. Well, thank you. So first of all, in thinking about, breaking through borders, just in thinking about the things that we've done at the Law Center, I thought about it in terms of what has helped in breaking through those borders. And I came up with 3 words: presence, persistence, and consistency. So presence, persistence, and consistency. So with the Law Center, first of all, just a little bit of a background on some of the things that we try to achieve at the Law Center. So I have been in my position as Executive Director of Global and Graduate Programs for the Law Center for about 5.5 years. So I started around 2019. I started the spring of 2019. And so the Law Center had some engagements internationally, mostly some connections with Mexico and South America, primarily. And actually, even before I started, there was a professor there, Professor Zamora, that had done a lot of work in engaging, especially with Mexico, and engaging with the Mexican Foreign Ministry, universities in Mexico. Unfortunately, Professor Zamora passed away in 2017. And at that point, that ended up leaving a really big deficit because he had developed so many great relationships that were personal relationships, really, that he had expanded to the Law Center. And so that really left, like I said, a deficit, a hole. And so, in 2018, at the Law Center, the dean and the director of U.S. and Mexican Law Center, they started reaching out a little bit in Mexico to try to regain some of those relationships. But it was okay. But one of the universities that we had a really good relationship with in the years previous to that was La Salle University, or Universidad La Salle. And with that university, in reestablishing the relationship, or trying to reestablish a relationship, that seemed like a good place for me to start when I started at University of Houston at the Law Center in 2019. So I reached out to them, and so there still wasn't much of a relationship, but it was an opportunity to try and re-engage. One of the things that we did as a Law Center was decided to go to Mexico. To restart the trips to Mexico. So the dean, director of U.S. and Mexican Law Center, and myself, we went to Mexico and visited these with La Salle and a bunch of other entities and schools there, but La Salle was one of them. So that's the presence, actually going there and being there, so that the school can, or the relationship can be built on presence. And then, so after that, one of the things that I try to make sure that I do in any opportunities to build or rebuild relationships is persistence. So if somebody sends me an email, you're going to get it right back. I'm going to respond quickly. I'm going to follow up, because then it shows that this is somebody that really wants to engage. And so I really, included that tactic in dealing with LaSalle University, so that we ended up getting into a good exchange of, okay, well, maybe this is a relationship we want to reestablish. Maybe there are some things that we can do together. So that led to us actually reviving or renewing the MOU, Memorandum of Understanding, with LaSalle University. And the other thing, and so that's the persistence, okay? And then the other thing is that whenever there is an MOU that we engage in, and Michael just mentioned, the actioning of these MOUs. Well, one of the things that I do is as soon as we sign an MOU and we have the nice little, kind of celebration around it, we usually do like an acknowledgement type of either in person or via Zoom, an acknowledgement meeting where we get together and acknowledge that we have now entered into this relationship. And so the next thing that I do immediately, and so we'll have the meeting one day, certainly within that same week, you get an email from me saying, great, we're happy to be part of this and we're excited to work with you, so let's schedule our first meeting. And so what I do is we get a collaboration meeting is what I call it, but it's set up for every month. So we meet once a month and in the first meeting what we do is set the action plan for the year, for the academic year. We list off the things that we collaboratively agree that we want to pursue for that year. And then each meeting following, we're making steps towards achieving that. And literally, I'm going down the list, checking off, making sure that we're moving forward. And so that's the consistency. The consistency of meeting, the consistency of showing that we're achieving these goals together. And so through the partnership with LaSalle, and it's been difficult. I mean, there have been difficult points because, and that's the other point of consistency and perseverance and presence, is that with LaSalle, there have been periods of time. So after we reestablished connection, then there was like, after a couple of meetings, then there was silence. And I'm sending email, I'm sending follow-up, I'm trying to get in touch, and there was nothing. Then maybe, a few months later, I was finally able to reconnect with them, but they had gone through several changes within the organization. They had changed the key contacts, and so several people had changed. And they apologized, but we had to kind of start over. And then, believe it or not, about 8 months or so later, it happened again. And by then I kind of knew, I said, okay, they must be going through changes again. And sure enough, that's what they were going through. But I still followed up, still kept, persevering, if you will. And now we're once again at a really good place, and we've been able to institute a 5+1 program with LaSalle University. And that's a program where their students are able to complete their first law degree at their home school, and then they move into our one-year Master of Laws program, which allows them to develop transnational lawyers, meaning lawyers that can practice law on both sides of the border. So, so there's definitely things that we're achieving, but I guess my point of all of this is that these types of relationships are not always easy, but as long as both parties are willing, they are possible, but you really do have to persevere.
Thank you so much, and thank you for persevering. We benefit, and the University of Houston benefits. Luis, can you talk a little bit then, just to give the broad overview briefly about the process that we try to follow here, but also the many different ways in which we can break borders through partnerships?
Yes, I mean, is it well? Because I never know how to kind of modulate my voice. I'm so sorry. So, continuing with what Karen was stating regarding consistency and perseverance, one thing that I will add is something that we have worked in the past 2.5 years since I joined the team, is to have structure and communication. And to reinforce what Karen was saying is that developing partnerships require a lot of external communication, but also internal communication. We were just talking briefly before how I break borders. And more than borders, I would say that I affect or impact more internal thinking schemes. Basically because we all are under certain circumstances or under certain philosophical foundations, and it's important for developing these partnerships to be aware that there are other philosophical foundations in other places, and we're working together in order to achieve something that is for the benefits of both. So we rely a lot in the similarities. We rely a lot on the things that we can easily connect, and we find ways to navigate our differences. First one is to make sure that we both, to formalize a partnership, need a document. And that document will go into into the reviews of the legal departments, and it might be fast or it may not. And because of this, we also rely a lot in our champions. So Karen is one of our champions, and I see a couple more here, and thank you very much. And which means that we are following through, and we also, our champions are also following. We are following together, and our contact in the other universities working together. We're working together. So we're supporting that in order to formalize the things that we're doing, to show proof that the conversations are happening and that this document will also be linked to other projects. Once we have the general conversation formalized to a memorandum of understanding, which is the general one, we can start developing specific agreements that will also lead to more identifiable outcomes. And these outcomes may be hosting someone from France who is going to teach here, as we have one here right now, so thank you, Stanislav, here. Hosting people to do research in a lab or in a project with a UH professor, sending our students somewhere else, sending our students to Amsterdam for doing a visit, like the College of Nursing, it's also working on, thank you, Dean Todd. Also, connecting this with COIL projects. Now we have the COIL project that Professor Gregorian was speaking before, and now we have a partnership with Yerevan State University that we have something solid that we're pursuing. So this is the shared ownership. We don't create things that are going to be hidden in a paper, and it's just for a picture and that's it. It's just to report that we're doing things. We want to keep things alive, and that's what we're doing here. One thing that I'm always excited about is that I love stories, and every single partnership comes from one story that starts with a single conversation of, what about if we try something? So don't be afraid to explore things that you really wanted to try. One thing that I'm aiming and I'm looking forward to implement here and to develop here are non-traditional partnerships. Most of the things that I have spoken right now are considered really non-traditional. So I encourage all of you to have to keep our minds open and to think, what are the things we can do, and explore if these things need to be formalized, and I'm here to serve you.
Thank you both so much for sharing that. Let me now invite everybody to please go ahead and corner either Dr. Alcocer or Dr. Jones to talk about partnerships, to hear how to best move forward with partnerships or how you might grow partnerships. One of the things that we're working on is to try to take partnerships that start in one corner of the university and build them across the university so that we can draw from the entire strength of the University of Houston to meet up with the strengths of all of the different strengths of the different partner institutions that we have. But often it needs a little spark, and that spark can come from the law center, from the nursing school, from the language programs, from any part of campus, and then we can really make it reach out to include all of us at UH. So please feel free to talk to them. As we said earlier, as my colleagues have said, there are some great examples of some of the different types of programs that are going on around the room today. So take another 5-10 minutes to do that, and then we will move to our final presentation of the day to talk about a wonderful and exciting architecture program in Japan. So for now, take another 5 or 10 minute tour around the room, visit with each other, and then we'll do our last panel. Thank you.
Thank you. I will give a slight history and in a way how our program would be similar to many of the programs, and this may be for students, it may be for staff, it may be for other faculty. This program we've traveled to Japan 3 times. The first was in 2019, and then 2023, and then 2024, with the interruption being because of COVID. And under challenge, I would argue the challenge that anyone may be interested in a program or starting a program is a bit just the challenge of the unknown. And if I go back to 2019, and let me relate it to architecture very quickly, it's a hand-in-glove relationship. There's no question study abroad and architecture are kind of meant for each other because we can go and see buildings by noteworthy architects in other parts of the world and see what they do that is both similar to what we do, but also what's different than what we do. And we then obviously learn from that. And so the challenge of the unknown is simply beginning the process. And of course, there's much help here from the staff, and that is fantastic. But in 2019, partly maybe because of my own ignorance, but also my own desires, I took it upon myself to organize everything, right? Now the university doesn't like that, and I can understand that because it's a part of being careful, right? But what I'm trying to relate to is how you get through the unknown, right? And so a couple of things that I'll stay and then move away from is, Airbnb and Google Earth are great sources, right? In Airbnb, in the beginning, I was doing the logistics. Now we have logistic providers, and so that actually makes the unknown easier, right? So in a way, you move forward from what was starting in that regard. I'm referencing Airbnb. It may or may not relate to some of the other programs, but we had issues of where we're going, and buildings are scattered around different countries, different prefectures, different cities, obviously. Sometimes they're not even in cities, and so we have travel logistic issues. And so there's a lot of those kind of characteristics that you have to be aware of and just accommodate, right? We tracked ourselves with our phones and all that, and we logged about 240 miles of walking in the 25 days or so that we were there. And so I'm trying to say that because you don't know in this regard just what might be ahead of you. Now, for some, you might be going to conferences, you might be going to pre-established destinations. We, in our desire to see different architectural outcomes by different architects, we're motivated to go to find these places and to see these places. And so it's a testament to the students. It's a testament to what the university allows. We weren't shackled in any real way, and I say that in this regard. We would start our program about mid-May here in Houston, and we'd have classes for a couple of weeks. And then we would leave typically around June 1, and we'd be traveling about Japan through June 24, 25. Students would then have a week approximately to travel on their own. Then we would reconvene here around July 4th, let's just say, and then we would have another month or 5 weeks when we'd come back. So we would go from mid-May to mid-August, and particularly at the end of August, no one was particularly excited about starting the semester, the fall semester, in August 23rd or whatever. But to the students' credit, and I think to the value of these programs, they all bought into it. And so I'm saying that mainly just to give everyone a perspective that while the unknowns may be out there, they're typically overcomable. Now there's, again, a kind of a great integrated staff scenario, and so that helps in many ways. A lot of information to overcome any anxieties that anyone might have. And so I just want to support the staff. I want to support the programs because I believe in study abroad. And I think people come back with a different mindset, and that, I think, is the outcome we all kind of want. So I'll give you a little description without trying to get into the weeds too much. I'm just trying to talk about our program a little bit. There was a conversation I had, I think it was with Stacy, but in the end it was talking about ROI, return on investment. Many years ago in our program, we had just one class offering, which is a design studio, which is the main studio in the various 5 years, which is the College of Architecture program. And students were saying, you know, that's a lot of money for one course credit. So we modified that to where now they have 3 course credits. And so yet you take on a lot, and of course the courses are set up different because you're gone for whatever number of weeks you might be gone. But I want to lobby and in a way thank the university for allowing these, because I think, again, the return on investment in terms of a mental, emotional, cultural, all those kind of things we could say, is so much greater than if we miss an article or we miss reading a particular chapter in a book or whatever it might be that we don't get done. The takeaways are so much greater. So I'm saying that just as an encouragement to anyone who might be considering. This is, now I will go quickly through this. What I'm just going to get at is give you some images of what we've seen, right? So you can begin to kind of see what might be captivating, and I won't spend time on all of these, but I want to go and describe our program slightly. We have 3 courses. One is a history and theory, and you can see just by some of the keywords I've put in there in terms of what we're trying to do, but it's the idea of being able to see a kind of we're interested in contemporary architecture, there's no question about that, and yet it would be wrong to go to another world, another part of the world, and not really try and understand their culture. So we do that, right? So we have a kind of a history theory course that's one of the components of the class. We also have an elective, which is really more tailored to the design studio outcomes, but it's, as you can see by the title, Constructed Assemblies, it's really trying to look into the components that make up a building, and whether it's a porch, as you see on the left, a kind of a grand space and a kind of unusual roof. If you look there just a bit to your right, the older assemblies where they literally would use rope to tie things together. All of these kind of are interesting, kind of a contemporary take on some of that at the end. Yeah. Our project was a chapel. It was a non-denominational chapel. We had non-denominational chapels. We had Christian chapels. We had Muslim chapels. We had Jewish temples. All of this, so the students were able to sort of activate their own kind of interest in faith and begin to kind of look at that. And so these are just examples that you see. But we wouldn't just focus on those, and so you're seeing here the image on the left is a building in a college campus, a museum, a street scene in Kyoto. And so we're looking around. Of course, we're traveling, and we have many destinations, but I'm just trying to link in kind of the cultural aspects so you can see here Hiroshima, and this is a contemporary monument to the dead in Hiroshima, and Nagasaki, right? And so you can kind of see kind of the different kind of outcomes of some of these kind of more eventful, monumental kind of scenarios. We would also travel, these are from Katsura, which is an imperial villa in Kyoto. So we're just trying to, Japanese garden design is as valuable and incredible as kind of their architectural design. So we're trying to link a number of events together. But it is a studio, right? It is that. And so I just want to show you some of the outcomes there. You can see the cities we went to. We basically were gone, I think, 25 days, and approximately about 12 or 13 are all the cities other than Tokyo, and then the last was in Tokyo. And so just to give a logistics of how you might get around, we would have bases in Tokyo, became kind of a home base for sometimes travel away from Tokyo. And so we were constantly on the move, more so this past semester than in some of the previous semesters. It wasn't really a challenge, though, I will say. The ability to use phones, and so again, if any of you would be interested in programs where you're moving about a bit, the phones are incredible. The students are incredible. They work them better than I do. There's no question about that. But we would, groups of 11 to 14, you can't believe how crowded it can get in kind of the underground subway situations in Tokyo, and you could say, yikes, I'm a little upset about what that, but people will just pin themselves and we'll just regroup, and so we never got separated. We never had a problem. And so I'm saying that we've had other faculty travel to, I don't think I'm getting it right, but I'll say Mogadishu, but areas where transportation might even be more challenging. It's certainly not challenging in Japan, but I'm saying that under this kind of the overcoming the unknown. And so if travel anxieties are a part of those unknowns, I would encourage you to not worry about that, right? Because here again, we're in a country, we couldn't speak a word of Japanese. No one had that. There's a fair amount of English. So all these things that you might say or be resistant taking on those, I just want to say, typically, we did have no problem. In my second trip there, we had a student had to go to a hospital. It was not a problem, right? I don't mean to get into the details on that. I'm just trying to share these events under the theme of challenge and how you can say these are problems that could arise, but they just seem to be overcomable. Now, again, Japan, at least going to the hospital, that's going to be less of an issue than some places, quite possibly. Anyway, so this is just an introduction to the syllabus, right? And so I'm just going to quickly go through what we do, right? And so, as I said, we have this non-denominational chapel. Our site is in that third slide to the right. There's a little kind of linear park along a river. But all this was found out through Google Earth, right? And so, if you have concerns of these types, it was just amazing between, again, Google Earth and WhatsApp and phone maps and all that how you can communicate and get things done. So anyway, just to show you that, and then just to give you some examples of this is what we do, right? And so you're just seeing kind of examples of chapels that were used. The site was, again, selected by me before the first trip, going and flying over Tokyo to kind of find locations. And so that might not be your problem, but I'm just trying to say these things under kind of the overcoming challenges as to how we can use technology to get these things done. So these are just images of the varying chapels. This is the mosque right here, and so you're just kind of seeing kind of the image. This one was kind of built on the hillside, the students had the option to kind of analyze the site. We had back to the constructed assemblies. We had to kind of begin to see how these buildings are built. I realize that's not specific to anybody else's problem. Here, kind of identified as the Chapel of Light, right? And so you can see kind of manifestations of sort of architectural outcomes and how call it the pixelization of light, if you like, But in the end, just trying to show these kind of outcomes here. One, you can look at the seemingly possibility. There's a Japanese term called ihiu, which is sort of the idea to explore what either doesn't seem possible or puts you in awe or these kind of scenarios. The student did some research and found a building, and how it could be done. We're, again, not going to get into that, but these things where it just seems like it couldn't be done, it can be done. And that's what we oftentimes learned in Japan, that things that we don't think about as being possible in this culture, this country, you see are indeed possible in other cultures, in other countries. And so it's quite eye-opening in that regard. So anyway, these are just kind of, again, some of the requirements that in some of the other drawings. And so here, you're just seeing these different outcomes. So, we like to show pictures. We're architects, right? And so we do that. And so then in the end, it's remiss to not talk about gathering, right? And so that's the last project I'll show you. And so here we are, right? Don't remember. Yeah, somewhere in Japan, I can tell you that much. I want to say it was near Fukuoka, which I did not know about Fukuoka, but here you go. I think we were in an area just outside of it, right? But, you know, it's enjoyable to have these events where you can kind of sometimes wear yourself out, sometimes take breaks, sometimes enjoy. The top center photograph is actually a donut shop designed by an architect that we respected a lot, and so, you know, you had to go there and see. But ultimately, just trying to see, and then here we are visiting with our friends in terms of the kind of the sense of how it can be dense and intense, but actually quite stimulating in that regard. And, you know, just here we are, right, kind of enjoying or at least trying to kind of overcome a challenge. So that's Japan. So.
Thank you very much for taking us to Japan. You see what I mean? You can travel without even leaving the University of Houston. Although I wish you'd brought some of the donuts from the beautiful donut shop. Thank you all very much for everyone who participated and everyone who visited. Let me just say again, one of the last things you said was so important to me about how what this does is it allows you to kind of gather and see that some things that you thought just weren't possible are possible and are done in different parts of the world. And that makes you realize just what is possible in your own part of the world. And what we try to do at the Institute, what we try to do at the University of Houston is open our students' eyes and minds to those opportunities and those possibilities. So let me just say thank you again for coming. Take a last few minutes and look at any of the posters, talk to any of the colleagues that you haven't yet had a chance to talk to, and go out and go global, go Coogs. Thank you.